Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on navigating the disability tax credit. My name is Jessica Ferguson, and I'll be your host for this afternoon. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that we, the New Brunswick Adoption Foundation, are a provincial entity. We acknowledge that we carry out our work on the traditional unceded territory of the Wolastoqey, Mi'kmaq, and Passamaquoddy peoples. This territory is covered by the Treaties of Peace and Friendship, which these nations first signed with the British Crown in 1726. The treaties did not deal with the surrender of lands and resources, but in fact recognized Mi'kmaq and Wolastoqey titles and established the rules for what was to be an ongoing relationship between nations. We, the staff and members of the board, pay respect to the elders past and present and descendants of this land. We honor the knowledge keepers and seek their guidance as we strive to develop closer relationships with the Indigenous people in New Brunswick. As an organization focused on vulnerable children in the care system, we express these words with both humility and hope. Before we dive into our discussion today, I want to take a moment to remind everyone about our network and our upcoming programming. The New Brunswick Adoption Foundation is a nonprofit organization that aims to promote and advocate for children in the permanent care of the province. Our vision is that every child or youth in the permanent care of the province finds a permanent family. A quick note about our upcoming programming. We have monthly support groups, both available in French and English for waiting, adoptive, kinship, and foster caregivers. Coming up in November, we have our annual permanency conference, and registration and information about all of these programs are available on our website at www.nbadoption.ca. So a couple housekeeping items. To get the most out of this presentation, I encourage everyone to switch to speaker view, and you can find that up in the corner, and so that you can focus on our lovely presenter. We love engagement here, so please do use the chat feature throughout the presentation to ask your questions or state your comments. You can find the chat by pushing those three little dots in the bottom of your screen. If you're following along live on our Facebook group, go ahead and ask your questions there as well. At the end of the presentation, we will be turning off of our live video for our question and answer session. So if you're joining us live, please do register for our future webinars if you'd like to take part in the Q&A session. At the end of the webinar, we'll have a brief poll for you to complete. We'd greatly appreciate it if you could take a moment to answer the 5 questions. Your feedback is invaluable to us supporting our ongoing work. This survey will pop up in your browser when you close the Zoom. Okay, so now to introduce our presenter. Today, we have Liz Macbeth joining us from the Independent Living Nova Scotia. She's a Disability Tax Credit Program Manager and is here to tell us all about the DTC and how to navigate the application process. So Liz, why don't you take it from here?
Thank you so much for that introduction, Jessica. It's really lovely to be here with all of you folks. Thanks for joining. I know that your time is valuable, so I am just going to jump right in. Okay, well, thanks for joining for the free Disability Tax Credit Navigation Services information session. My name's Liz Macbeth, and I'm with Independent Living Nova Scotia. So jumping right in, what we'll be talking about today is starting with who is Independent Living Nova Scotia, if that's new for some folks, also known as ILNS. That's where I work. And then the program that I'm in is the Disability Tax Credit, or DTC, Navigation Services team. So then we'll move through into what is the disability tax credit itself, what are the requirements and benefits of it, what is the eligibility. We'll rest there for a while and move through into what resources has our DTC team created for this, and how folks can refer to our navigation services. And then moving through into what we hope is a lively Q&A, and you folks can chat to me. I would just ask folks to hold those questions until the end, but do write them in the chat at any point. So, a bit about who Independent Living Nova Scotia is. ILNS is a nonprofit charity, and they serve all sorts of folks with disabilities, hoping that they create an inclusive community where folks can, at home, work, and play, live independently, break down barriers, and we can help with breaking those barriers. Now, I want to get deeper into what is the DTC navigation service that my team and I work with. So this service launched in December 2024, so it's relatively new. It is a free program for persons with disabilities and their supports, and we serve all of Atlantic Canada. So you'll notice that we are with ILNS, so a provincial organization, but this funding is for all 4 provinces in Atlantic Canada. We have a few pillars of support. So we provide one-on-one support, and then we provide presentations. We also have a medical referral network that is still building and expanding and is just in its beginning phases. And we provide all of this support in French and English. So that piece of one-on-one support, that's really important to us. We provide that in person, virtually, and we will get really creative with that. So if potentially someone needs to go into a local service provider because they're not great with tech and are in another province and we're located in Nova Scotia, we can make that partnership and make that happen. So we also take a roadshow around Atlantic Canada once per year. And we did 15 stops last year. We do multiple stops in every single province. We did 4 in New Brunswick. So we came to St. John, Moncton, Bathurst, and Fredericton. And we will be bringing that in 2026 as well. That is to bring one-on-one support. So what that looks like, it's not presentations only. It's not, talking at folks, it's listening. So basically we're taking office hours and we want folks to be able to talk about their case with us. So we have large drop-in sessions at these roadshows. No need to register. You can come and you can talk about your case. You can start getting answers from us, and then we can have follow-up to that if at all needed. We can have one-on-ones with those folks who come. So that is a big piece of what we do, one-on-one support, all the way from, has a person not heard of DTC, to are they looking to do an appeal, and everything in between. Then our presentations, that's another huge part of what we do. So we provide presentations like this one. We do staff presentations. We do medical practitioner presentations. We do client presentations. A lot of it is us doing these presentations in person, but a lot of it is doing virtual presentations. So we want to meet folks where they're at. If we don't currently have a presentation model that someone can suggest that will reach folks in their area, we had someone request in a bit remote area in Nova Scotia and Labrador a couple different times, can we hold something in person and we can beam you in for the presentation? And we said yes. We've had a couple unique asks, but we want to make it happen and be creative. So presentations are a big part of this. And then the medical practitioner referral network is another foundation stone for us. So we'll get deeper into this, but part of the form requires a medical practitioner to sign it. So we noticed it was a barrier for folks that might be eligible if they had no one to sign Part B. So we started out trying to break down that barrier, trying to start a medical referral network. We didn't have anyone in November of 2024. By the end of December 2024, we had someone to fill that gap in Nova Scotia. Then we had someone we could roll out to fill that gap in April 2025 in Newfoundland, and someone we rolled out in July of 2025 in Labrador. So the reason I mention this is the momentum is building. We are still talking to folks in different areas of New Brunswick, PEI, and the provinces we're in to try to keep building that. We don't currently have a practitioner to refer to yet in New Brunswick, but we're in talks and we're hoping it'll be coming in 2026. And then we don't leave folks, after the one-on-ones. We want to do post-support check-ins. So if people have questions after they've met with us that are related to DTC, we're there for them. And again, this support is all in French and English. Our website, our resources, and the one-on-one support can all be French and English, both official languages. So jumping into probably why a lot of folks are here today. What is disability tax credit? So disability tax credit is basically an equation against what people owe in at income tax time in the spring. So DTC is a non-refundable tax credit that helps persons with disabilities or their supporting family members reduce that amount of income tax that they do have to pay in the spring at income tax return time. That can reduce the amount that they would owe in that year when they apply, future years for a term of time when they are approved for, and up to 10 years in the past if they were meeting eligibility during that period. So that is the nutshell of what people know about eligibility. And I want to move into, about benefits. And what I want to reach into, though, is the other two programs that having an approved disability tax credit can unlock for you, because I see these as extended benefits. So we know about what it can do for the income tax return. We know about what it can do for the retroactivity of that. But you need to have an approved disability tax credit in order to be able to apply for these two programs here on the screen. So the Registered Disability Savings Plan, or RDSP, and the Canada Disability Benefit. I'm often telling folks when I'm meeting with them one-on-one, please just keep these in your back pocket. Know that these exist. Look into them if and when you do get approved, because the first piece of eligibility for both of those is being approved for disability tax credit. And they each have completely different benefits than disability tax credit does. We'll get more into those later. So that's benefits in a nutshell. What I want to talk about now is eligibility for the disability tax credit. So the entry level eligibility piece is that you do have to have a social insurance number. You need to be a resident of Canada for tax filing purposes. And then a very important piece, you have to work with a medical practitioner to fill Part B of the disability tax credit form. They call that Form T2201. And that medical practitioner has to show in the part they fill out how those conditions or disabilities are long-term and how they're impacting that person's daily life. So you can see why, when this is one of the foundation pieces of eligibility, we noticed that it was a gap if people ran up against the brick wall of potentially being eligible and not having anyone to sign that Part B. So that's why we started working toward and hoping to continue expanding this medical referral network. Now, getting deeper into who is eligible for disability tax credit. Okay, on this slide, we're going to talk about Canada Revenue Agency's framework that they've created for the disability tax credit. So there are a few ways that you could qualify for DTC, but the first thing to know is they use this term daily living activity, and that's because they don't want to solely look at someone's diagnosis. They want to look at what is the condition you have, do you have a diagnosis for it, and is your daily living affected? And if so, how so? Put those pieces together. So that's why this framework can seem off the jump a little bit confusing, but I promise it really is something we can understand. In the next two slides, I'm hoping that will be the case. So you would need to find that the person applying had one or more of these 9 daily living activities along the bottom affected for them. You see them here in bold. They are walking, hearing, speaking, vision, dressing, eliminating or bowel function, feeding, life-sustaining therapy, and the final one, mental functions necessary for everyday life. So those are what CRA for this eligibility terms the different daily living activities that someone can fall under as meeting eligibility. Now you would need to find that those are affected in multiple ways in order to be eligible. So I just want to mention the term daily living activity. I think for some folks, they can wonder exactly what that means in their life. I will have people come to me and say, oh, my daily living, it's absolutely affected. So I must 100% be eligible. And I think the thing to know here is your daily living will be affected in some ways that fall outside of this framework, and it will be affected in some ways that fit within this framework. And it becomes knowing what those are, and then how you can, show that through your doctor in Part B. So going back to those 9 daily living activities, one or more of them would need to be affected in a few ways. So those ways are all here on the screen. The first one is the bottom arrow that says the disability needs to have lasted or be expected to last for 1 year. That's the first piece. This next one also needs to be true. The arrow above that says the disability needs to be present almost all of the time. Now, in their guide, CRA says what they mean by almost all of the time is 90% of the time. That needs to be present 90% of the time or more even with therapy, even with medication, even with devices. Now, the reason they're mentioning that is because, they're trying to catch cross-disability eligibility here, right? So they're making sure, for example, my vision, it's affected 100% of the time, but this device happens to be fully corrective for me. So that would mean that, that would take away my eligibility. No, so those are the first two pieces. Now, this last one also needs to be true. It's represented by the top 3 bullet points, but it all basically speaks to severity in your daily living. So you would either need to find that you have a marked restriction, and I'll tell you what that is in a moment, in one of those 9 daily living activities, or a significant limitation, I'll tell you what that is in a moment as well, in 2 or more of those daily living activities, where those limitations added up to a marked restriction. Or you could have a life-sustaining therapy and meet the eligibilities for that. So those definitions, very important. I have them all here. And I just wanted to tell folks, if you're note takers, this PowerPoint slide deck has been shared with the folks at NB Adoption, and they are going to send this out after. So yes, take notes if you want, take screenshots if you want, but this will also be shared with you, okay? So the marked restriction I mentioned, you would need to have a marked restriction in one of those daily living activities or a significant limitation in 2 or more. So a marked restriction means either the person can't do the activity at all, or, now this is where a lot of folks do start to think they fit in when they weren't sure as we're going through in the one-on-one, or it takes 3 times longer than someone of similar age who does not have that condition or disability. And just like before, that's even with any medications, therapies, or devices they might be taking or using. Now that's the definition for marked restriction. If someone thinks they don't have that, there is still another way. They might have a significant limitation in 2 or more of those daily living activities from the last slide, where the combined effects of both of those activities equal that marked restriction definition, equal things taking 3 times longer. And then the very last way that I mentioned on the previous slide of the life-sustaining therapy, they have specifics about that one as well. So a life-sustaining therapy would need to be supporting a vital function. For example, kidney dialysis, insulin pump, oxygen therapy, etc. And these 2 pieces underneath also need to be true if it's a life-sustaining therapy. It would need to be happening twice a week or more. And this last part is where a lot of people are going through, okay, yes, yes. And some people don't meet this exact last one, that life-sustaining therapy must take 14 hours a week, affecting the daily living. Okay, so those are the definitions for those fun new terms that I talked about here on this last slide. So going back to the last slide, this is everything all together now. We know what these new terms mean. So you know that things would need to have been happening for a year or more, or be expected to. You know that, the disability needs to be present almost all the time, 90% of the time or more, even with meds, therapy, and devices, and that things would need to be taking 3 times longer in that daily living activity, or not be able to do it at all, or have significant limitations across 2 or more daily living activities, equaling things taking longer, or that life-sustaining therapy. So you see, all of this needs to go together and be true. So some folks at this point, when we're doing one-on-ones, will have an idea, but also have some questions. So what I would normally do now is, if I was meeting with you, take this eligibility framework, overlay your case, and then talk about them and how they interact with each other. We'd jump into the disability tax credit form. We'd look at the different pages that relate to that daily living activity, and we would look at the guiding language they're using, so that you would feel even more comfortable, even more settled in knowing if you feel you're eligible, if you feel you meet that, and if you want to go forward. So that's eligibility. I want to move on now to, I mentioned the form, move on now to talking more about the form, really what it looks like. So we know you have to have that SIN to apply, but then you also have to fill out Part A, and you have to get a medical practitioner to fill out Part B. And then closing it all out, by submitting and filing those taxes if you get approved. So let's talk about what that Part A, Part B complementary relationship looks like. So there are two parts to this disability tax credit form, Form T2201. And you would fill out Part A. Part A is pretty entry-level information. We do offer filling for Part A if folks want, but a lot of times people don't want that because, as you can see, the person with the disabilities, it asks for their first and last name. It asks for their mailing address, date of birth, social insurance number, that sort of thing. Then, if the person who's going to claim the disability amount against their taxes, if that person is different than the person with the disabilities, then they would fill out number 2 on Part A. And that's often a supporting family member. So for example, the parent of a child with a condition or disability that meets the eligibility. Now, CRA says that in order to show that you are a supporting family member, you have to be providing what they term the basic necessities of life. And for them, there are 3 of those: shelter, clothing, and food. So what that looks like is it will ask you if they're filling out that section, because sometimes the person with the disability is the same as the person claiming it. But if the person with the disability is different than the person claiming it, and there's a supporting family member involved, then they would need to prove that shelter, clothing, and food have been being provided and are being provided. So this asks for examples. Can seem a bit strange, especially in a parental situation, to say, yes, I am providing food, but this isn't always someone who's a child. Sometimes it can be an adult who someone is supporting. So they have to ask that in order to catch all the different types of situations. It will ask how long you have been providing those, and it will ask examples of how you have been providing them. Now, we mentioned retroactivity before, and it being able to go back up to 10 years, as long as that person with the disability was meeting the eligibility. So it can go back as long as the supporting family member was meeting this eligibility of providing the basic necessities of life as well. So this is a bit about Part A. It's a 16-page form, folks. Part A is only 2 pages. So what this means, looking at what Part A is Part B is where all of the eligibility is proven. So what we suggest to folks is helping the doctor fill it fully and know you best by creating a list of recent examples. Part B is the one that the medical practitioner fills out. They have to fill out Part B. They're going to be answering check boxes. They're going to be writing short answers in order to prove that eligibility framework we just talked about. They have to show that that framework is true, that the client's conditions or disabilities are affecting them doing those daily living activities to the level of proving that eligibility. So the reason we suggest this next point here about creating a list of recent examples is because we noticed sometimes people were hearing back that they weren't approved, not always because they weren't eligible, but sometimes because there were errors, but oftentimes because it wasn't filled fully. It really wasn't proving what's happening in the daily life. The medical practitioners, they know the medicine very well. They often know you, but the person with the disability and the condition, the supporting family member of that person, they know the case best, right? So it just becomes providing a little bit of supplemental information to those folks who are filling out Part B to give you the best chance of describing the truth of what is happening, right? So when I mention these examples, we're looking for folks creating just short bullet point recent examples to pass on to the medical practitioner filling it out. So what I often suggest to folks is, do they have someone to fill it out? If so, can they make an appointment with them, ask if they charge a fee so they know what to expect? Can they ask if they can pass these examples on, or if they can be there when it's filled, or have a discussion before it's filled? Basically, be able to talk about what the eligibility is, what is being experienced in the daily life in one way or another before this medical practitioner undertakes filling it out, just to make sure that it does really represent what's happening. And if folks are meeting with me in a navigation, or any of the DTC navigators here, what will happen is at this point, we could start talking about how you'd create examples. Do you have someone to create them with? Talk about some mock examples, talk about some examples that are relevant for this case in this situation. Start creating some and then figure out, okay, does this feel like something you can do on your own, finish on your own now? And if not, we can help you create that entire list of examples. So it really is case dependent to what's needed in that situation. But we want to make sure that that list of examples gets created. We can help with it if need be. And so we would always, though, jump into the form, look at the form itself, and ask, okay, which is the daily living activity that's affected? Well, let's look at the part that talks about examples. Let's look at the language they're using. Do you find that that's affected 90% of the time? Do you find that that's happening 3 times longer, taking 3 times longer? That sort of thing. So anyone doing this, even without us, can definitely look at the questions in Part B that do relate to that daily living activity that's affected. And they can look there for an idea of what information CRA is really looking for. And hopefully that can make people feel even more settled in their own or the family member they're supporting's own eligibility. So I've talked a lot about this form. I want to show you the form in a moment. And I want to go back here to talking about the medical practitioners who can fill Part B. So Part B needs to be filled out by a medical practitioner. In this day and age, as you know, a lot of people don't have family doctors. So here's who can fill it. A medical doctor can fill each and every section, all of the daily living activities. A nurse practitioner can likewise fill each section for all the activities. Then there is a specialized medical practitioner who can fill most sections if you don't have one of those, or if you just have a close relationship with these folks and want them to fill it instead. So it's all listed here on this slide. But for example, the vision section, it can be filled by an optometrist. The speaking section, it can be filled by a speech language pathologist. You kind of get the idea. So there are sometimes people in folks' lives who are wanting to fill this who can fill it and they didn't know. Some people will come to me and say, I don't have a family doctor, I have no one to fill it. Well, here's the thing, you notice it says a medical doctor can fill all sections. It doesn't have to be your GP, your family doctor. It could be a specialist that you have. It could be an endocrinologist talking about your insulin. It could be a psychiatrist talking about the mental functions necessary, that sort of thing. So we do go through making sure maybe they have someone in their life that can fill this, that they can approach already. So I just want to read this list of who these extra practitioners are. For vision section, it's optometrist. For hearing, it's audiologist. An occupational therapist can fill multiple sections: walking, feeding, dressing, eliminating. And then a physiotherapist can fill the walking section, as well as an occupational therapist. A psychologist can fill mental functions necessary for everyday life. And a speech language pathologist can fill that speaking section. Remember, a medical doctor and nurse practitioner can fill each and every one of those sections. And I do just want to mention, if people are believing that they meet the significant limitations part of the eligibility, they need to fill, the medical practitioner needs to fill the portion of Part B that speaks to the cumulative effect of significant limitations. And a medical doctor and nurse practitioner can fill that page. Also, an occupational therapist can. Okay, so that's a bit about what medical practitioners could fill Part B. I've mentioned to you that we are rolling out a network. We do not have one in New Brunswick yet, but we really hope to. We've spoken to multiple folks there and got close to one time, and we hope that we'll get much closer and be able to roll one out soon. So I do just want to show you the form that seems kind of infamous now that I've been talking about it so much. Jessica, could you give me another nod as to whether I've put the form up here for everyone?
You're good. Yep.
Great. Thanks, Jessica. Okay. So this is the disability tax credit form. I've left it so you can see the pages down the left because it is a 16-page form. You can see me scrolling down here. So what often happens for folks is they find this daunting. They look at it, oh, gosh, how am I going to fill this big form? Now, the good news is what we've talked so far is about Part A is only 2 pages, right? And What that means then is that that's a little bit less daunting, but Part B, that's another 14 pages. Sometimes for medical practitioners, that can seem daunting for them. So it can be a bit of a help sometimes if you know the pages that need to be filled when you go to your medical practitioner, and you can say, actually only 4 pages need to be filled in my case. And maybe that just seems a little bit more attainable, and we can give you that information when we do that one-on-one with you. So Part B is set up like this. Each different page is a different one of those daily living activities that we talked about on the slides. So vision, it's 1 page. Speaking is another page. Hearing is another page, etc. It goes on like that. The only daily living activity that's more than 1 page is mental functions necessary, and it's 3 pages. Then there's that cumulative effects page, only being filled if you're going after significant limitations, if you're filling out more than 1 daily living activity. There's the life-sustaining therapy page, if applicable. And then there's a final page for the medical practitioner to fill, certification. It would always need to be filled, this certification page. So just giving you an idea of what that looks like, only the pages that are relevant in the case that you're taking to this medical practitioner, they would only fill out the pages that are relevant in your case. So that could mean maybe they only need to fill vision in the last page, something like that, right? So I wanted to show this to folks just so it really does show, okay, it's a big form, but now you know your way around it. Hopefully it feels navigable. And I want to talk just one last piece before I pop over from the form back to the PowerPoint, is I mentioned medical practitioners could fill different pages of the form, that a medical doctor could fill each and every page. A nurse practitioner could fill each and every page, and that there might be a specialized medical practitioner who could fill certain pages. You can actually tell that here at the top. So it says for vision, a medical doctor, a nurse practitioner, and an optometrist can fill it. It'll tell you at the top of each page on Part B who can fill it. Now for speaking, it says medical doctor, nurse practitioner, and speech language pathologist. It will always do that at the top if there's someone other than a medical doctor or nurse practitioner who can fill. We talked about mental functions necessary. This one has medical doctor, nurse practitioner, and psychologist. So I think this kind of concludes what I wanted to show you, but I am hoping that this does make it seem a little bit easier to handle, to navigate. Okay, so I am going to go back now to the slideshow. And folks, just let me know if you can't see this. So moving on a little bit from eligibility. I just want to mention that if we're having a one-on-one with folks and we're talking about eligibility, sometimes they need to go back and talk about it with some family members and really talk about what they think about those examples and come back to me. And sometimes there can be a follow-up one-on-one, a phone call. I can look over the examples, or we can do another meeting where we create examples together. So this really can be case dependent. It doesn't have to be one size fits all. Okay, so let's say eligibility has been spoken about, and we're ready to move on. Maybe they've taken this to the medical practitioner and they're ready to submit. They filled out Part A. Part B has been filled. Talking about how you'd apply. I want to put up here the different ways that you can apply. There are 3 ways. And this can be kind of the last piece that you could discuss with that medical practitioner, because there are 3 ways to do it, 3 paths to apply. You want to make sure Part A and Part B are both filled out on the same path. You don't want to be filling Part A online, filling Part B on paper, right? So you could ask your doctor, do you really prefer paper? Are you old school? Do you like that? Do you actually really prefer it to be involving tech? Do you want it to be online? And then put together what you prefer, what they prefer, and start down the right path together. So, okay, there are 3 ways to apply. The first way is you could mail it in to your nearest CRA tax center, providing that there's no mail strike, I know. That's option number 1. Option number 2 and 3 are both in CRA My Account. So this is a point where if we were meeting with each other, I would ask folks, do they have a CRA My Account? Do they know how to start one? If not, we can info share. We have something we can share with them to talk to them about how to start that CRA My Account. Then The ways to do so in there, first way is you would fill out Part A right in CRA My Account, would generate a code for you. You'd give that code to the medical practitioner filling out Part B, and they would use it to fill Part B. The other way to apply in CRA My Account is by filling Part A and Part B in a fillable PDF, and then you'd upload that PDF into the CRA My Account. I just want to stress here, folks, to please keep a copy of how Part B is filled by that medical practitioner before it is submitted, just for your records, in case you need it later. Okay, I just want to stress that. So after you apply, it's a waiting game. Once received, the CRA will go through that application. And they mention online that it can take 8 weeks or more to review that. We are seeing it take more than that right now. And at that point, I just want to kind of give tips and tricks here if I'm meeting with someone to not only look for when you hear back the yes or the no, did you get it or not, but also what else it tells you. So when you receive a notice of determination, you want to keep an eye on, okay, did I qualify? Is it approved? But also it will say on there how many years you qualify for the DTC. So surprisingly for some, it isn't always indefinite that they give it to you, even with ongoing conditions or diagnoses. And so it's often given for a term of time. So that means you might need to reapply. And you should look here to see when it does say you qualify for. Does it end, for example, in 2035? If so, you are going to need to reapply through this same process at the moment, unless they streamline that later. You need to reapply to make sure that doesn't expire for you. And you would do that at the end of the term of time. Now, you also want to keep an eye on if that notice of determination says that you didn't qualify, it will also say the reasons why. Now, this is an opportunity to compare those reasons why with the Part B copy that you hopefully kept. And you can compare those yourself, or you can come to me or another navigator. We do that a lot, actually, making a comparison to see if maybe there was information missing, like why did that happen? And if you see a red flag, you can try to rectify that through a request to review or filing an objection. So, doing an appeal to this, right? We can help with that process. We can have a one-on-one with you in that case. So we are there for you during that as well. But I do just want to tell folks, okay, great. Notice of determination, very exciting that you got it. Make sure you're reading what else it says, right? And if you didn't get it, it's frustrating that you didn't get it, but make sure you're reading what else it says. And then in each one of those scenarios, that can provide you with more information you need. And that is the process of disability tax credit. The last piece is you are going to want to claim that credit. For anyone who wants more information than this PowerPoint, more information than the resources that are also going to be shared with you, there is a detailed guide on CRA's website at canada.ca. And it goes into different sections. So the who is eligible section, it's a lot of what we talked about. The how to apply talks about more detail of exactly what the address is, for example, for the Jonquière Tax Center that you might need to send it to, or the other tax centers that might be near you. And then there's also a section that says claiming the credit. And that section is very helpful if and when you do get approved, whether you're the person doing your taxes or an accountant. It goes into great detail on how to claim the credit, right down to which line you would claim it on. There are different lines, for example, if you are claiming it as the person with the disability or if a supporting family member is claiming it. So I just wanted to mention that guide as an additional resource. And just don't forget when you're filing your taxes each year that you will need to remind them you have the DTC. It's just a check. So that's what I wanted to tell you about it. Everything except for those 2 programs I promised I would tell you more about in the very beginning. So beyond the disability tax credit wraparound navigation that we do want to tell folks, do information sharing about these other 2 programs. These here on the screen are Registered Disability Savings Plan, or RDSP, Canada Disability Benefit, or CDB. Now, the reason we want to tell folks about this is because the first piece of eligibility for them is having disability tax credit. So they each have their own eligibility. It doesn't mean you're automatically approved for them, right? If you get disability tax credit, but you don't gain access to apply for these unless you have disability tax credit. So I want people to see this as additional benefits, and maybe it seemed like, a lot of work to do disability tax credit, so they can put this off until when they hear back if they're approved or not. They can put it off and say, okay, I'm going to write these down. I'm going to make a note, and I'm just going to look into these if and when I do get approved. Because they each have, along with having their own application eligibility, they each also have their own benefits. So getting into those, the Canada Disability Benefit, a lot of people might have heard of this because it just launched in July 2025. It's quite new, and you need to have a disability tax credit approved. If you're 18 to 64 and have that disability tax credit, and if you have low or modest income, now people must be filing income taxes for 2024 and future years. And if you are a resident of Canada for tax filing purposes, then you could get up to $200 per month. So up to $2,400 per year, not a small sum. I have this table in here, not because I'm going to jump into it and bore you with these details, but because you're getting the slide deck. If anyone is wondering, what do they mean by low or modest income for a single, for couples, right? Then I put this here in case you'd like it later. Okay, so that's Canada Disability Benefit. As you can see, a very different benefit scheme than to disability tax credit. So the other one, Registered Disability Savings Plan, or RDSP. This one's been around for a lot longer. It isn't always fully understood, so I do like to talk about what it can offer folks. Now, this has a different benefit than the other two we talked about. This is more of a long-term saving plan for folks who have disabilities or their supporting family members. So it can assist people with disabilities or their supports with planning for that long-term financial security. But this one, how you apply to CRA for disability tax credit. You also apply to the government for Canada Disability Benefit. This one is a contract between a financial institution and the client. So for RDSP, if you want to open one, you would go into any large financial institution and start there. I would suggest, asking the folks you're speaking with, whether that's virtually that you're speaking with them or in person, I would suggest asking them, do they have experience with RDSP? It can help to have an experienced person open that for you. And I would also suggest reading the guide online, the RDSP guide. We also have a toolkit for RDSP, and I'm going to share that with Jessica. So this will be coming out to attendees today as well. So I would suggest just making sure either you have that information, the person you're working with knows that information deeply, or both when you are opening an RDSP. And the benefits been talking about, they are different than the ones we've looked at for the other two programs. So the beneficiary could receive either a grant or a bond. Now, the grant looks like matching money. If money is put in, it can be matched up to a ceiling per year. A lot of people, that's all they know about it. And they think, I don't have any money to put in, this isn't for me. The other part, though, that I like to tell folks about is there's a bond option. So I'm only an expert on disability tax credit. I just want to say that. I information share lightly about RDSP. There is a guide and toolkit about this that goes into more detail. But if you are eligible for a bond, there could also be a bond put in to RDSP, and either the savings grant or the bond, there's an opportunity here for compound interest. And so that's why this really can be a long-term savings plan that can be, beneficial and lucrative for folks. The beneficiary can also receive up to 10 years of unused grant or bond amounts, so that retroactivity, the same way as disability tax credit. And they do not affect the provincial income assistance amounts in the provinces that we serve. Now, the requirements for the eligibility for RDSP is similar to some of the things we talked about before. You have to have a SIN, you have to be a Canadian resident, and you definitely have to have an approved disability tax credit. Now, there's also an age requirement. You can receive that savings grant or bond up to the age of 49. From 49 to 59, you can put money in yourself. So folks over 59 are not often looking into this. And then folks over 64 are not often looking into Canada Disability Benefit. But I just wanted to tell people about these to keep in their back pocket. If anyone here on this webinar, has not heard of them before or is thinking about going for disability tax credit, don't forget to look into these too. Okay, so here at ILNS, we have created some resources to help you through your disability tax credit journey. So we have, here on the left, we have a rack card. We also have a larger flyer. We have a step-by-step guide with a table of contents that, we've tried to make some plain language that we've tried to make accessible about how to go through the process of disability tax credit. We've created all of those here. We've created an overall services video, and all of those items, including our website, are available in both official languages, French and English. There's also, from a previous program run here at ILNS, an RDSP toolkit that we have available. Since that was under different funding, it is not available in French and English, but we do have it available for folks who want the English version. So that's the resources. Now, I just wanted to talk a bit about if people want to get in touch with us. We're not going to turn away a referral. We want more people hearing about and accessing disability tax credits. So if you're not using the web form, you can call us, you can email us, right? You can walk into the ILNS office, where we're going to serve you for disability tax credit. These are just some of the ways, that folks can reach us. So we have a pretty well-liked disability tax credit web form, a contact form, and it's on the website Disability for ILNS. And you can find that here. Once you go there, you can click on English, you can click on French. There's a French form, there's an English form. And it goes into great detail. So a lot of people prefer that because they can say if they have any disability related accommodations that they need. They can tell a little bit about their case, and they can tell us, I'd really like to be contacted by email over phone, etc. We ask, what is your preferred method of contact? Plus the normal items people always give, such as their first and last name and where they're coming in from and how we can contact them, what their contact is. So that web form's popular. But if you want to refer to us by email, this dtc@ilns.ca, that reaches all the navigators here. We're a small but mighty team of 2. And this phone number here, there's a local number with an option 3. There's also a toll-free 1-800 number. And we do have a referral intake form that we usually give to organizations where it kind of asks, okay, is this true? Is this true? Is this true? Well, then you might want to look into disability tax credit. So can always share that as well if anyone would like that for anyone in their life. So that's a little bit about how you can reach us for those one-on-ones or for presentations, whatever it is you might like from us. And I wanted to mention how we're able to bring this program to you. So we do have federal funding. Our free navigation services have been made possible through the Employment and Social Development Canada's SDPP-D program. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. I'm going to leave my contact information up here, leave our website up here for just a few moments in case folks want to take a picture or want to jot this down. But I want to open the floor now. I want to have a discussion period and folks can, get a chance to ask me questions now. We'll be moving back and forth between questions from the chat and also verbal questions if you'd like to unmute. But I will, for the moment, I think, turn things over to Jessica, who's going to help me with this portion. Thank you so much for listening, folks.
No, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. It was great. Just a quick mention for our people who are watching on Facebook. We're going to stop the live stream now, but we will come back to the questions that you posted into that chat, and I will have the answers for you in the comments there as well.